On a lonely ridge above the hollow of Hinterwald stood the old keep of Baron Adlerstein. It rested among beech and dark fir. Only the watchtower kept its head above the trees. The keep had once been proud. Now it leaned and sighed like an aging man. The Baron was a small man with a large belief in his own importance. He kept every old grudge as if it were an heirloom. His one child was a daughter. She was the single bright thing left to him. People said she had no equal in all the valleys. Her two maiden aunts raised her. They taught her manners, needlework, and how to hide her heart behind propriety. She grew cautious, gentle, and very lovely. A marriage was arranged. An old Bavarian house agreed to the match. Letters had come from the young man in Marburg. He promised to arrive on a certain day. The castle prepared as if for a coronation. The cooks labored. The huntsmen brought game. The cellars were opened. The aunts fussed over the dress until it seemed to glow with care. The bride was shy and full of quiet hopes. She sat by the window and watched the road. The Baron watched from the tower. He strained his eyes until they watered. Even the guests, a swarm of poor relatives, kept a festival at his expense. They ate and laughed and believed, in their simple way, that this night would fix everything. Meanwhile, the young count, now called Friedrich von Albers in the papers he would write from the road, rode with a friend. He had met Lucas von Hohen at an army post. They spoke of old skirmishes and of far places. Friedrich told, as young men do, of the bride he had never seen. He recited everything his father had told him. He rode with honest comfort, like a man going to a known meal. The road through the woods was thin and lonely. Bands of lawless men moved there then. The two friends were set upon by cutthroats. They fought. Friedrich was struck down. Lucas bore him back to Marburg. A friar came from a nearby monastery. He opened herbs and prayers. It was not enough. With a dying hand, Friedrich pressed Lucas and begged one thing. "Go to the keep," he said, "and tell them I will not come. Tell them I have been killed. Tell them quickly I cannot rest until they know. Unless this is done, I will not sleep." He spoke the words with a soldier's hardness and a man's fear. He died still thinking of the appointed pledge. Lucas promised. He buried his friend near the cathedral where fine families lay. He dressed his face in sorrow and took the road for the ridge. He rode a mission not of triumph. He rode to be a messenger of death. Back at the keep, the banquet had already begun. The Baron could not postpone the meat. Plates were passed. The hall rang with voices and the clang of cups. A horn outside suddenly cut the clamor. It echoed from wall to wall. The warder answered. The drawbridge fell. A tall rider stood at the gate. He wore black and carried a quiet sorrow on his face. He dismounted and looked upon the bride. Her cheeks moved like petals. She answered him with a glance and a half-shy smile. No one saw in that instant the shadow that would weigh on every later hour. The stranger tasted little at the table. He watched her, and she watched him. Their low words made the hall hush in an odd way. The aunts nodded like judges. The Baron told his longest tales. Wine loosened the tongues of cousins. But the strange man grew colder in the light. His laughter never came. His eyes wandered as if to some other place. As the night deepened, he rose and said he must go. The Baron asked him to rest. He refused. He told the Baron he had an engagement he could not break. It admits of no substitute, he said. He spoke of a cathedral and a grave. He said, "The worms expect me. I am a dead man. My body lies at Marburg. At midnight I am to be buried. The grave is waiting for me. I must keep my appointment." He sprang on his black horse. He left under the stars. The Baron and the guests were stunned. Some thought it a jest. Others thought a curse. The two aunts crossed themselves. One poor cousin swore the man had the look of the wild hunt. Next morning the letters came. The news was plain. Count Friedrich von Albers had indeed been murdered on the road. The cathedral kept his body. All the papers said the same thing. The keep fell into a gloom that would not be lifted by more food or stronger wine. The bride wept as if the shape of a future had been torn away. She wandered the galleries and sat opposite her own reflection. At night she could not sleep. Her aunt stayed with her one evening and told a long ghost story to keep her company. The tale rolled on and on. The lids of her aunt's eyes grew heavy. She fell asleep mid-sentence and left the bride to her thoughts. The chamber looked out on a small garden. The moon silvered the leaves of an aspen. At midnight, a faint music rose from the shrubbery. It was like a far-off harp. The bride rose and crossed to the window. She saw a tall figure among the trees. Moonlight touched his face. She knew him, as one recognizes a promise. He stood pale and still. The music went on, and then stopped. She gave a cry. Her aunt woke and followed to the glass. When the aunt looked, the figure had vanished. The aunt was terrified. She wanted the bride to leave the room. She feared the house was haunted by some restless thing. But the bride felt a strange consolation. The face in the moon was the face she had been promised. Even as shadow, it seemed fuller than an absence. She refused to leave the room. She vowed she would sleep there alone if need be. Her aunt agreed, against her real nature, to say nothing. For a week, the aunt kept the vow. She held the story like a small treasure. Then one morning the house awoke to find the bed empty. The curtains were drawn back. The window was open. No one had seen her go. No note was left. No trace of a foot on the path. The bird in the garden flew from its cage and called. They searched the keep. They called the valley. They sent riders to the crossroads. They examined the corridors where the portraits watched with colorless eyes. No sign was found. Some whispered that the bride had walked with the specter into the night. Some said she had fled from grief to somewhere abroad. Others said only that love, when it meets death, can vanish in a very small space between two breaths. The Baron shut himself in his room. The aunts told the tale and then sat silent. The cousins went home with the story to tell other plates. The watchtower still stood above the trees. The moon still found the aspen leaves, but the chamber where the bride had slept remained empty. The villagers still speak of that night. They say a pale horse passed the lane. They say a figure rode with the hush of a grave. And sometimes, on a wind that strips the leaves, someone will swear they hear a far harp tune. They will fall quiet and look up at the tower. They will think of a promise kept beyond the living.
It rained the night Emile Bauer walked home through Marseilleville's oldest lanes. Thunder ran along the roofs. The city felt raw and empty. Emile had come from a quiet town to study at the academy. He read late. He lived alone. He lived with ideas. Dreams had begun to shape him. One face returned to him night after night. It was too perfect to be memory. It pressed at him like a demand. He sketched it in the margins of his books. He woke with it behind his eyes. It moved him without reason. That night he turned into the old square where the scaffold had stood. The storm lit the steps in jagged flashes. There, on the lower step, a woman sat hunched under a torn cloak. Her hair clung to her face. She rocked as if keeping time with the rain. Emile froze. The lightning made the dream true. He moved closer and spoke, his voice small against thunder. She lifted her face. Her eyes were wide and precise. Her skin seemed carved from moonlight. Emil felt the old dream settle in his chest like a stone. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She pointed toward the scaffold with a thin finger. "No friend," she said. "No home." "Come with me," he said. "My rooms are small and warm." He felt both foolish and certain. He could not explain why he offered protection. She rose and let him support her. They crossed the swollen river together. The city slept for a while. In his lodging, Emil set a single candle and watched her. When the light touched her face, he felt dizzy. Her hair fell like dark water. A narrow black ribbon circled her neck. She wore a plain dress, yet she sat as if expecting an audience. They spoke in low fragments about books and music. She had a strange knowledge of court poems and old songs. He listened as if learning the language of a new country. For a few days, he moved as if in a bright fever. He believed in every small kindness. He believed the world had shifted toward him. Dawn one morning leaked through curtained glass. Emil rose early. He made tea and set the table with shaky hands. When he turned, the room seemed to tilt. She lay half over the bed. Her arm hung like a broken branch. Her skin had an ashen calm. He called her name. There was no answer. Panic pushed him. He hit the door until the landlady opened and then screamed. Neighbors came with lanterns. A policeman arrived with heavy steps. He stepped into the room and froze. "Who brought her?" he asked. "I did," Emil said. "She was in the square. The officer moved to the ribbon at her throat. He undid it with quick fingers. As he loosened it, the head slid and struck the floor. A silence fell like cloth. The officer stood very still. He had seen many things in the city's work, but his face tightened. "She was executed yesterday," he said. "They carried out the sentence at dawn. She was a condemned woman." The words were precise. They cut the air into something thinner. Emil's feet left the floor. He could not hold them. He could not accept that a living woman had been in his bed and then was not. He told the crowd what he had felt when he first saw her by the scaffold. He said, "I have dreamed her. She came from my sleep." They argued. They offered simple answers. They said the city had many cruel tricks. But Emil would not listen to calm words. He stood and paced until his limbs loosened with fever. Days passed, and his speech grew odd. He spoke to people about spirits and signs. He began to write passages where she spoke back. He refused food at times. He slept in fits. A few friends attempted to help him. They took him to a doctor. They begged him to rest. His mind held to a single image, a woman's face rising out of storm and wood. Sometimes he sat for hours staring at the floor where her head had fallen. At last his friends could not keep him at the study. He was lodged in a place for those who could not bear their minds. There he told the story again and again. He said the ribbon had been a binding. He said death had not ended the promise. The keepers spoke softly to each other. They watched him with thin patience. In time, his voice thinned. He stopped asking questions. He lived out his days behind white walls and small windows. People in Marseilleville retold the tale. Some said Emile had taken longing for truth. Some said the city itself was hungry, and that it sometimes gave back what it had already eaten. Those who knew Emil best said his eyes never left the place where the head had fallen. They said on stormy nights, when lightning comes sudden and sharp, a stranger will mention a black ribbon nodding near the old square. They will say, promises sometimes cross the line between what's alive and what's not. In the end, Emil's bed held only the shape of his long gaze. He would sometimes wake and whisper a name no one heard. His hands kept drawing the outline of the woman's face on paper until the sheets were spotted with graphite. Years folded. The white walls kept their slow habit. Marseilleville forgot and remembered in turns, but the scaffold's place stayed hollow in the square. And on certain nights, a passerby swore he saw a black ribbon move in the rain.
No one in Alderby thought Ellen Price would ever marry Thomas Hale. She laughed the first time he asked. She laughed the second time. The third time she called it a bad habit and laughed harder than before. Thomas was different. He kept at things. He had a way of making them happen. The men at the Vineloft Club joked about it. Ellen was the village beauty. We all pretended not to notice how often we looked at her. So when Thomas walked in and told us he was to be married in September, the room went quiet. "Your wedding?" someone said. "Who's the lucky man?" another asked. Thomas filled his pipe and answered easily, "Miss Price and I are to be married." We laughed at first, then we watched him. There was a calm in his voice that shut us up. When the engagement came out into the open, Ellen blushed. She smiled as though she had always loved him. Whatever the truth had been before, it changed that evening in the churchyard. That is when I stopped asking if she cared for him. I was crossing the churchyard one golden August evening. The turf there has a thyme smell in high summer. It softens the footfall. I vaulted the low wall and moved between the stones. Sun hit Ellen's face as she sat on a flat gravestone. Her face was turned toward the setting sun. It was transfigured, simple and terrible in its beauty. Thomas lay at her feet. He spoke like a man who would follow her anywhere. "My dear," he said, "I believe I'd come back from the grave if you wanted me." I cleared my throat then. They looked up, and I stepped into the shadow, knowing everything. They set a date. I was to be the best man. 2 days before the wedding, I had to go to town. At the station, the pair were walking the quiet end of the platform. They held each other like people who had nowhere else to be. Ellen's eyes were red. I pretended not to notice them. I took a first-class seat and tried to look casual. Thomas joined me. "Here's luck," he said, cheerful as ever. He told me his godfather, an old man who had been good to him, lay ill at Ashcombe House. He must go. He promised to be back in time. "Nothing shall keep me," he said, lighting a cigar. He meant it. The next day, my sister worried. "He's not back," she said. I shrugged it off. I trusted Thomas. But that night, standing at his door in the rain, I heard that he had not returned. I slept badly. Morning broke bright and blue. A note from Thomas put me at ease again. "Meet me at 3, he wrote. "Come on to the church." Ellen waited in the garden among hollyhocks. Her voice had a strange tightness when she told me he had stayed because the old man begged him. "I wish he hadn't," she said. At 2:30, I took the road to the station. The 3 o'clock train came and went with no sign of Thomas. There was a delay. The 3:35 was late, of course. The extra 35 minutes felt like an hour.
I was impatient in the way only some men know. When the late train turned up, I flung myself into the carriage I had hired. "Drive to the church," I told the coachman. Thomas had not come by that train either. Fear rose in me like cold water. Had he been taken ill? Had there been an accident? The idea that he had played Ellen false never crossed my mind. We reached the churchyard a little before 4. A double row of people lined the path. All eyes were fixed on the church door. "Our Biles says Mr. Hale looked ill," a local man whispered. "He had dust on his coat. He seemed like a ghost." I did not want that to be true. Then the doors opened. They came out together. Thomas looked like a man who had been dragged through the dark. His coat bore dust, his hair was disarranged, a dark bruise arced above one eye. He was deathly pale. By comparison, Ellen was carved from some pale stone. Her dress and veil shone. Her face was very white. The ringers stooped to slip their ropes. They meant to make the bells ring. Instead, a single, slow toll came from within the tower, like a bell pulled at a funeral. The ringers dropped the ropes and fled. People whispered and took a step back. The bridesmaids stared. The bride shuddered. Gray shadows gathered about her mouth. They left the church in a hush. No rice flew. No bells rang. They climbed into the carriage for the short drive home. We followed with a tight, confused dread. Old Mr. Price cursed softly to the coachman. "Drive like hell," he ordered. We passed the carriage. Its windows were drawn. I did not look into them. At the Price house, we waited on the steps. The carriage returned alone. We ran to it. It was empty of anyone standing. On the cushions lay a white shape. Ellen was a heap of satin, her veil half over the seat. We lifted her out. Her skin was ashen. Her hair had gone white from some shock. The look on her face was not of fainting. It was a look of pure terror. Her eyes were wide and empty, as if she had seen the very bottom of the world. She could not speak. A boy in a ragged cap came up the avenue. He handed me an orange envelope. The paper trembled in my fingers. I opened it with the impatience of a man who can hardly bear the news he expects. Mr. Hale was thrown from his dog cart on the road to Ashcombe at 1:30, killed on the spot. The words were sharp. Thomas, who had declared, "I shall be married, dead or alive," was dead, and legally married at 3:30 in the parish church. What happened in that carriage on the way home we never knew. No one saw anyone leave it. No one could tell why Ellen had aged like snow and gone silent with horror. She lay like a statue for a day or two. Her hair shone white as if frost had touched it. We watched her like mourners watching a candle. Within a week, the grave on the Thyme Hill was opened again. This time they placed Ellen beside Thomas. They had loved and been married in that small church. They were buried close together on the hill where they used to sit. The thyme grew over their graves. People said the pair had been fated. Others whispered of dreadful knowledge passed in the carriage. No one could prove a thing. The truth sat heavy and still, like the smell of thyme after a rain. Sometimes, on late summer evenings, I go back to that churchyard. I sit between the stones and breathe the faint, sweet scent. A wind will come, and the thyme will stir. It brings the memory of a laugh, a hand, a promise. And for a moment, the world seems whole and honest. Then the sun drops, shadows come, and I remember the look on Ellen Price's face, and how quickly a bright life can be drawn white.